I also need to focus on the amazing and greatness of Black people and their contributions.
Dangling from a balcony. Look at this. You can see
What's your definition of a hero, or your definition of a superhero?
One of my friends said one time, if you're cool with us, we're cool with you.
Whatever it is, Black people exceed that definition by far.
In every area that we've been allowed to participate in, we've always been the best. So in science, was Imhotep or Granville Woods or Lewis Latimer, you name the area, we've been good at it.
Okay, I have to be very honest. I'm in a mood today. I'm fired up, and you are going to get it like it is. Why? Because I've been watching a narrative play out for centuries that tells us Black people are broken, that we're failures. Really? We are failures now? The same people who started at the very bottom, who had every injustice and mistreatment done to them, and who are now becoming the fastest growing and the most influential group in America? That group is a failure? No. No. How about this? How about a little bit of truth for all these haters out there? The truth is, if anyone on earth had 1/10 of our story, they would be celebrated as superheroes. And that's what we are. Superheroes. How else do you explain a people that has been so marginalized, so disfavored, that the whole might of the U.S. government was against them? How else do you explain that the very group which has had every single injustice thrown at them, and I mean every single one, that this group is now rising fast and is now the most influential group in America? How else do you explain that the people they labeled as intellectually backward and incapable is actually the one who invented all the hallmarks of civilization? So the argument before was, Black people are not smart because they didn't have any civilization in history. Well, it turns out the one civilization that can be considered as the first civilization, the Zeb Tepi civilization, that invented everything from writing to mathematics, from medicine to algebra, from religion to philosophy. And that civilization happened to be Black, literally called Kemet, which means the land of the blacks. You can't make a better plot than that. How about this guy, Cheikh Anta Diop, who single-handedly took on the whole 20th century archaeological establishment and proved that ancient Egypt was a Black African civilization, while he was being attacked, insulted, and discredited by all establishment and his peers. Another hero. Or how about a man who refused to bow down to white colonialists in South Africa and spent decades in prison and became the symbol of his people's fight for freedom? And there are so many examples within the Black community that they in fact become like roses in a park. And then, when they found out ancient Egypt was Black, and that all genetic testing of ancient Egyptian mummies is coming as pure sub-Saharan and infra-Saharan African, they tried to say, well, ancient Egypt wasn't the first civilization anyways. It was Sumer as part of the Mesopotamia civilization complex. And issue for those who are not honest is that the earliest remains in the Mesopotamian civilization were pure Black people. They also called themselves Selma Kakadi, the black-headed people. And that's when the civilization of Sumer had all its inventions and was at its peak. Are the haters getting angry yet? Now they are trying to say, no, 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 it all started with the Levant, with the Natufians, who built Gobekli Tepe. You guessed where this is going, right? The genetic testing of Natufians came out as Black African, and that the Natufian language clustered more closely to Niger-Congo languages, where the Ishango bone comes from. You can't make this up. Then, to top it all off, they tried to say, "Okay, white people, Aryan people are physically superior." Only problem with that is that black people are literally dominating any sports they apply themselves to. It's not even close. And even in endurance running, Maghrebian and East Africans are dominating. Oh, and even in this age of fitness craze, you have black people who, without any supplements, are looking like perfect body specimens, naturally sculpted superheroes with perfect body proportions. Before we get too far, let's address this one thing. I want you to guess the number of great Greek thinkers that wrote one of their great ideas before they traveled to Africa to learn from the Kemetic priests. Go ahead. I'll give you a couple of seconds. 0. There are no great Greek philosophers or thinkers that didn't spend significant amount of time in Africa before writing any of their thesis. Oh, but Pythagoras didn't. No, just stop. Pythagoras spent decades in Kemet before writing anything. Democritus, same. Euclid literally copy-pasted all Egyptian mysticist knowledge and called it his. Solon, Aristotle, if he ever existed, Plato, Plotinus, Thales, Heraclitus, Socrates, Epicurus, and so many more spent time with the black African priest. And the Greeks were honest about it. The only people who were not honest about it are modern-day historians and influencers. It seems Europeans at the time had more reverence for the black man and said with honesty where they got all their knowledge. And that's coming from their own admissions. That the Egyptians were not only jet black people, they called them Melas, to the purest black, with woolly hair. And that these people were the most learned and wise on the planet. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have the ancestors of the Europeans saying that the black people were smart beyond limits, and Nick Fuentes and his gangs of social media educated people saying that black people are genetically inferior with low IQ. Well, actually I lied. IQ tests is a big sham. Let the experts tell us why.
Does the continent of Africa have the lowest IQ in the entire world? Well, I'm going to be tearing this claim apart in this video. If you've been unfortunate enough to scroll through some social media, you've probably seen something like this, where they're saying that the average African IQ in many of these countries is in the 60s or 70s. Now, these are claims that can be sourced, and your first instinct might be that the IQ tests that are administered in Africa are either unfair or culturally biased. But the reality is, they didn't administer IQ tests at all. The methodology that they used is so sloppy and cheap it belies belief. What they do is they take the profession that they record a population doing as an aggregate, and then they assign an IQ based on that. They're not actually testing it. So for instance, if they were to go to a village in Nigeria and they said that the people aren't working as accountants, they're going to lower the IQ to where they think that a population of farmers would be. Now, how do they get these numbers? They come basically out of nowhere, really from studies from the 1950s that don't really have any statistical significance. But when we actually go through these studies, what they're doing is they're just taking professions and saying, based on what we think the people are doing, this is what we think their IQ is. I mean, tell me, if you're from Africa, has anyone ever given you an IQ test or anybody that you know an IQ test? Actually, a proper IQ test takes a lot of resources. For each person, it takes over 2 to 3 hours to test them. And what's really shocking about this is that if you go off of the IQ measurements that they are reporting, so IQ in the 60s to 70s, that's generally considered a range at which people are unable or have trouble dressing or feeding themselves. So right off the bat, you know the data isn't legitimate. And the reason I want to just put this in the dirt is because we have investments in Africa and we do business in Africa. And when people slander people from Africa, that's bad for business. So not only is it factually inaccurate, it costs us money. And so when someone says to you, well, we think that the IQs are looking like this, ask them where the data comes from. You'll be surprised people will repeat things without actually knowing where the numbers came from. And
By the way, do you know where Europeans got the idea of the steam engine from? You are going to love this. During the Renaissance, the Moors, black and Arab savants, gave the Europeans texts from ancient Greece and helped them learn about their own history prior to the Dark Ages. In there, Italian researchers found texts and schematics from Hero's engine, often called Hero's engine. They copied the design to create the first steam engine. There are countless stories like this that prove black ingenuity well into antiquity. And these are the same people that they try to convince us today are backwards? Oh, brother, please. I almost said, went Dave Chappelle on you, a modern-day philosopher. Because it wasn't just in antiquity that black people invented philosophy and gave to the Greeks. Today, stand-up comedians are by far the foremost thinkers and analyzers of our society, almost mirroring a Greek theatrical play, or how the elders in black communities in both sides of the Atlantic speak to the new generation.
People were, and I kept hearing, oh, stand-up comedy is the hardest thing to do. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do that then. You know, I want to do the hardest thing that you have to do so that nobody can say that I couldn't do, so you couldn't associate me with anything else. I didn't want to be, because I'd been part of something that people were like, oh, no.
And I'll share with you what scares me the most. What scares me the most about marriage is the fact that men and women don't even look at marriage the same way. When women talk about marriage, it's a happy occasion. I'm getting married, I got my ring, I got my colors picked out, I got 4 of my fat friends to stand next to me. It's gonna be a beautiful day. No, their dress is ugly, mine is pretty. But it's not the same for the men. When men talk about marriage with our friends, it sounds like something you get diagnosed with. Did you hear what happened to Charles? No, what? He's getting married. No! I just seen him last week. When did he find out? She told him yesterday at dinner. Is there anything that we could do for him? No, the invitations already went out. There's nothing we can do. It's rough. I live in Atlanta. You think it'd be easy to find somebody in Atlanta. We have every group represented. We got the LGBTQ community. But it's 2022. You can't offend anyone. You can't step on anybody's toes. If you meet somebody in Atlanta that's attractive, you have to say things like, how long have you been a woman?
Black people are superheroes of history. Superheroes with their exceptional physique and strength, and superheroes of innovation. Like the son of former slaves who invented the light bulb as we know it, or the black man who invented digital cellular networks that all cell phones rely on today. That we have no history to be proud of, I reject that. I reject the endless psychological operation that says we are anything less than extraordinary. You know the one I mean. The narrative that's been pushed by governments, textbooks, media, you name it, all working overtime to convince us that our community struggles are our own fault instead of the result of deliberate, systemic sabotage. Well, today I'm here to flip that script. I'm here to tell you something that should be obvious. Black people are the superheroes of America, and in fact, the superheroes of the world. Yeah, I said it. Superheroes. And I mean it in every sense. Strong, resilient, ingenious, and frankly, unapologetic about our power. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what's really happened to black people in this country and across the diaspora. Let's talk about how, despite everything thrown at us to eliminate or suppress us, we not only survived, we thrived. We created culture, wealth, knowledge. We rose like the rising sun of Amun-Ra from every attempt to reduce us to ashes. And right now, as Western society grapples with its own decline, growing poverty, inequality, the old divide and conquer tricks that the elites are now turning on everyone, we, black people, have an advantage. We've been through the fire already. We were forged in it. Culturally, intellectually, psychologically, spiritually, we're tougher and more united than ever. This isn't about hate. Let me be clear. This is not an anti-white monologue. I'm not here to bash white people. I am here to uplift black people. There's a big difference. Because the truth is, you can praise the superhero without needing a villain in the room. We know who the villains of history were: slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and all those who enforced them. But I don't need to sit here and spew hate. Our power speaks for itself. Our story is epic enough without inventing enemies. And within every chapter where there were evil non-black people, there are also those from the white community that supported our shared humanity. What I will do is call out injustice, identify the patterns. I'm going to draw some parallels to superhero narratives because, honestly, our history reads like a comic book saga. Great evil forces trying to destroy us, and time and again, an unlikely hero, and here is a hint, it's us, rising up to save the day. I'll share some historical references. Yes, there will be receipts, citations and all, because our real life story is as dramatic and inspiring as any Marvel movie. And I'm going to get personal at times because this isn't just history to me. It's family history. It's my history. It's lived experience. And if you think this is hyperbole, explain this to me. How else do you explain that a people who started at the absolute bottom, forced into society's harshest conditions and absolutely mistreated, were subjected to intentional disease exposure in our communities, like syphilis, denied benefits and funding such as the GI Bill after the war, and watched successful black communities repeatedly destroyed, so severely that, at times, the government even used airplanes to bomb black populations? How else do you explain a group that was denied loans to start small businesses, while members of other communities were able to build on our street corners? Targeted by a system where the CIA sold drugs into our communities only for people to be arrested for possession, destroying their lives. Subjected to constant, relentless demonization by the full weight of the media apparatus from movies to social media, and harmed by egregious medical experiments that caused suffering and death. Oh, I'm not even done in terms of what was done. How else do you explain that a people who are the target of constant bogus research to dehumanize them, a people who have been targets of deliberate HIV infection, and a community that has seen its leaders repeatedly killed? How else do you explain that this same group is today one of the most socially influential and thriving groups in America and across the world, while our kids still have to endure abhorrent psychological attacks from the moment they can speak? If you wrote this into a movie script, any one of us would be considered a superhero. And the story is the same across the Atlantic and throughout the diaspora. If any one of those things were done to white people, it would automatically qualify as the scandal of the century. But to black folks, there are so many, I've lost count. And that's not even talking about the minor ones. Can you imagine racism being so pervasive that there are virtually no black people in America who haven't been on the receiving end of minor or major acts of racism? And yet, black people are still rising. Let me remind you, these are offenses that, in any other domain, we would recognize as psychologically damaging. And yet, through it all, black people have this knack for rising, finding a way, adapting, and making it work. So, if you're ready for it, let's dive in. By the end of this, I hope you'll see what I see, that black people, whether in Africa, in America, or anywhere in the world, have been and are the backbone, the genius, and yes, the superheroes of wherever we are. and it's high time we own that truth and act like it. Buckle up. Let's start with the ugly truth. They tried to eliminate us. I'm not being hyperbolic, I mean that literally. For centuries, powerful forces in America and beyond have systematically attempted to erase, suppress, or straight up destroy black people. This isn't conspiracy, this is documented history. It started with the transatlantic slave trade and slavery itself, one of the greatest crimes in human history. Enslaved Africans were treated not as human beings, but as expendable property. Millions perished in the Middle Passage, and those who survived were sold off, families ripped apart, whipped, worked to death. The goal was clear: break them, body and soul. Reduce a proud people to a state of permanent subjugation. They failed, and I'll get to that, but boy did they try. Did they teach you about the inventors of agriculture and the first ever civilization, the Natufians? Did they tell you how all the early skulls found in Mesopotamia, in Sumer, were black Africans? About the binary calculation system that the Ethiopians had 2,000 years before computers existed? About the endless list of black Americans inventors who followed in the footsteps of their ancestors and invented everything from the sprinkler to the first mass-produced car to the digital cell phone network to the first console game or women's hygiene pads? I bet not. And don't get me started about culture, where pretty much everything, and I mean every cultural trend, was started by black people. From rock to pop to techno to K-pop, which at its origin is a copy-paste of black music, to a large section of social media memes that were pioneered by black women. Yes, the ones that used to be the most disregarded and disrespected being on this planet, black women, have single-handedly invented all major trends that women use today. Or did they teach you about Queen Nzinga, who fought off Portuguese colonizers? Probably not. Or Yaa Asantewaa, to smack the British and save the Ashanti crown. Or Queen Amina-Rinas, who defeated the greatest emperor of the Roman Empire, forcing him to negotiate. No, they wanted us to think Africa was just a dark continent that Europeans saved, instead of the truth. Africa was the cradle of civilization and a major player in global history long before colonialism. The contributions of Africans and their descendants were deliberately diminished, trivialized, and erased from the story of the modern world. It's a strategy, because if generations of black children believe that their ancestors contributed nothing but pain and struggle, they might internalize a sense of inferiority. It's psychological warfare. And it wasn't just the overt disregard in the white hood. It was in boardrooms and government offices, too. Let's talk about one of the dirtiest tricks in the book: economic sabotage, redlining. You've heard that term, I'm sure. It's not just some abstract policy footnote. It was a calculated strategy to strangle black wealth building. In the 1930s and 40s, federal agencies created these color-coded maps of cities. They drew red lines around black neighborhoods, literally using red ink, and deemed them hazardous for investment. Translation: don't lend money here, don't insure property here. Black families, even solid, hardworking, credit-worthy families, were denied home loans simply because they lived in those red zones. If a black veteran came home after serving his country in World War II and wanted to buy a house through the new GI Bill, guess what? In many places, the banks said no, not for you, sir. The GI Bill was written race-neutral on paper, but in practice, black veterans got shut out. Over 1 million black GIs couldn't fully benefit from the bill's promise. Southern politicians made sure the GI Bill was administered locally so segregationists could exclude black folks. They feared black advancement, literally worried that educated, prospering black veterans would upset the Jim Crow order. So they sabotaged us, denied us mortgages, steered us away from colleges, refused us business loans. In Mississippi in 1947, of over 3,200 VA home loans, just 2 went to black borrowers. 2. You want to talk about systemic oppression? That's it right there in black and white. In the arts, oh man, the contributions are so vast it's hard to know where to start. Black people basically created America's popular culture. Blues, jazz, gospel, R&B, rock and roll, hip-hop, K-pop, yes, K-pop too. These are gifts from black America to the world, and they were often born from pain. Jazz was born from the blues, which was born from spirituals sung by slaves. Hip-hop was born in the Bronx, out of the ashes of urban neglect, and now it's a global phenomenon, the #1 genre in the world. Our creativity under pressure has literally shaped global music and fashion. Streetwear, anyone? Dance, from breakdancing to the latest TikTok moves, thank black kids for that innovation. And language. American slang is heavily black influenced, let's be real. America loves to appropriate our cool, our music, our style, our swag, even as it historically tried to crush the people who create it. And how about science and technology? Don't get it twisted, we've been there too, often unsung. There are so many black inventors in tech and engineering, we did an episode on that. Look for episode 72 on the Without History channel. Mark Dean helped architect the IBM PC era by inventing/advancing key PC hardware that made plug-in peripherals possible. Roy L. Clay Sr. helped launch HP's early computer division and led work on one of HP's first mini-computers. Marion Croak pioneered major building blocks of Voice over IP, VoIP. James E. West co-invented the electret microphone, the design behind most modern microphones. Valerie Thomas invented NASA's Illusion Transmitter, a precursor idea to 3D imaging claimers display systems. Jerry Lawson led the work that made interchangeable video game cartridges practical for home consoles. Gladys West produced crucial Earth-shape geodesy models later used in GPS. Katherine Johnson calculated trajectories for landmark NASA missions, and Annie Easley wrote code supporting NASA work, including the Centaur rocket stage. Black innovators are at the cutting edge of AI, of medicine, of climate science, despite being maybe one or a few in reforms that weren't built for them. We've always had the genius. Often it was just ignored or stolen. But it's getting harder to ignore now. Let's not forget thought leadership and social movements, areas where black people have led not just our community, but the entire nation or world forward. Oh, and if it wasn't for the Haitian Revolution, where blacks slaves freed themselves by defeating 3 superpowers in a row, slavery wouldn't have ended, or have ended then. Haitians beat the UK, Spain, and a little guy called Napoleon. Let that sink in. This has to be the superhero movie of the millennia. A small island against 3 superpowers, and they win, get their freedom, force France to include rights for all black people in the Declaration of Human Rights. This also kickstart the series of events that caused the U.S. to eventually abolish slavery. I've been telling you, black people are literally superheroes. That's also why Haiti is still poor, because they were those who couldn't stand that story, and they did everything in their power so that Haiti doesn't become a role model for all black people. So they embargoed it, repeatedly destroyed its super lucrative economy, and just like in black communities in the US, flooded it with guns and drugs. But guess what? We will free Haiti again. We will be in the street, and we will march until Haiti is free. Just like in Africa, where colonized countries were fighting the oppressing power of the West while they fought in the front line of the Second World War. And guess what? Just like with the GI Bill, when African men returned home after risking their lives to save Europe, they received none of the recognition and the compensation their European counterparts did. Actually, they did receive some recognition, but it was in the 2000s, 10s, after all of them had passed away, and only a few were still alive. And these World War II African warriors, as another example of superheroes where they had to fight two fronts, one from the Germans, the other from their own allies. Well, guess what? Many of them, when they returned home, became heroes who helped start what I call the first independence movement of Africa. The second independence movement of Africa is happening now with the rise of the AES alliance between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And that second independence movement is happening at the same time that we are seeing the rise of the black man and the black woman on the other side of the Atlantic. Even that story of how AES freed itself from the bondage of France and the West is another superhero story. But that one is just beginning, so we will dedicate an episode to it. And we did all this while being sabotaged at every turn. That's what blows my mind. It's like trying to run a marathon with lead weights on your ankles and a crowd of people throwing rocks at you. And still, you set a world record time. How? Superhuman determination. The very pressure that was meant to destroy us, in many cases, forged us. Not that I'm saying oppression was some blessing. No, I'd trade all the character building in the world to undo that suffering. But I am saying that in response to each attempt to knock us out, black people developing a new strength, a new strategy, a new art form, a new form of resistance. Which brings me to the present moment and the future. A future where the tables are turning in some interesting ways. The empire in decline, when Western society faces its own demons. Here's a plot twist for you. After centuries of acting like top dog, Western society, and by that I largely mean white-dominated society in the US and Europe, is looking a little shaky these days. I'm not gloating, it's just an observation. Income inequality is skyrocketing. The middle class is shrinking. For the first time in modern US history, life expectancy for some white demographics has actually declined due to deaths of despair, opioid overdoses, suicides, alcoholism. There's growing poverty in formerly comfortable communities. Young people don't see the same opportunities their parents had. Politically, things are volatile and polarized. Sound familiar? It's like the difficulties that were long concentrated among marginalized groups are now spreading more broadly. The whole society is starting to feel the crunch of late-stage inequality and systemic dysfunction. And how do the elites react when their own system starts falling apart? Well, they dust off the old divide and conquer playbook, the same one they used on us. This time, though, they're trying to use it on everybody. It used to be, pit white against black to keep them from uniting against the rich. That tactic goes way back to colonial times. As early as the 17th century, laws were passed in places like Virginia to give poor whites a few privileges over black folks, throw them a bone of racial superiority, specifically to prevent multiracial uprisings. Remember that the rich elite have learned their lessons from the failures of the feudal system that collapsed during the European Revolution of the 18th century. Because they know one thing, it is that if they push too hard on a united people, then the whole oligarchy pays. But if they keep the groups divided and fighting against each other, then they can delay the revolution, or even avoid it. Wealthy planters figured out that if indentured white servants and enslaved Africans teamed up, the elite would be in big trouble. So they manufactured the concept of race as we know it, created a social wedge. One historian described it like this: make the white servants feel superior to the black slaves by virtue of skin color. Trick poor whites into believing that any gains by black people come at their expense. Sound familiar? It's the same script some politicians still use. Those immigrants or those black folks are taking your jobs or your tax dollars. It's a lie, a distraction, meant to keep working class people from seeing who's actually hoarding all the wealth. Hint, not black or brown folks, but the billionaire class. For decades, that divide and conquer along racial lines worked to some extent. It kept many white working class people voting against their own economic interests just to maintain a sense of racial dominance. But here's the thing, that old magic is wearing off. As the elites run out of other people to scapegoat, they're even starting to turn on their own. By that I mean, the corporate and political powers are now perfectly willing to screw over the average white American too. Not that they ever truly cared about them either. The 1% doesn't care if you're black, white, or purple. They care if you're rich or not. The past few decades, they've shipped jobs overseas, busted unions, gutted social safety nets, and concentrated wealth to an obscene degree. Now we're at a point where the masses, of all races, are struggling, while a tiny elite prospers like kings. What do those elites do to keep control in this volatile scenario? They double down on propaganda and scapegoating. They use media, which they own, to stir up culture wars, to keep people fighting each other over anything except economic injustice. They pay off or platform certain individuals to act as mouthpieces. I'll call them traitors in the sense of betraying the truth or their own people's needs. For example, I can't help but notice how some black voices who condemn other black people or deny racism suddenly get amplified on big platforms and showered with attention. Almost like someone's rewarding them for towing a certain line. Likewise, you have talking heads who will spew anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-everything rhetoric. Maybe they genuinely believe it, but often they're funded by interest groups who benefit from division. The tactic is as old as time. Hire a member of Group X to sell out Group X so that it looks legit. The oppressor can then say, "See, even they say their community is the problem." It's a cynical game. We saw it in the past. There were always a few folks who would be used to undercut the movement. Back in the day, they'd call them Uncle Toms or informants or whatnot. And we see it now with certain media personalities and social media influencers who gain fame and fortune by attacking black activism or spouting racist ideas under the guise of political incorrectness. But you know what's even scarier and absurd right now? Being openly racist has become a profitable grift for some people. Thanks to social media and crowdfunding, you can literally go viral being a bigot and get paid for it. This is wild. There was a case recently where a woman caught on video hurling racist slurs at a black child ended up getting about $750,000 in donations from online supporters. Let that sink in. Behave in the most hateful way, and a segment of the public will treat you like a hero with their wallets. It's like a dystopian comic plot. Villain does evil, henchmen throw money and say, "Do more." Experts have noted this disturbing rise of open, overt support for racist actions, almost as a backlash to racial progress. It's as if some parts of society, fearful of change, have doubled down on hate, and the internet lets them congregate and fund each other's worst tendencies. This phenomenon is dangerous, but I also see it as a death throw, the last gasp of an old order clinging to whatever power it can by riling up fear. Why do I say that? Because the strategy is too blatant now. It's recognizable. Just like a bad PR campaign that we can all see through, the divide and conquer tricks are starting to get called out. A lot of young people, of all races, aren't buying it like previous generations did. Interracial solidarity is actually growing in many activist spaces. The Black Lives Matter protests, even though it was a CCI of 2020, had huge non-black participation, for instance. On the flip side, some disaffected young white men are being seduced by white supremacist rhetoric online. That's true, and it's alarming. But I believe that is ultimately a losing strategy for the elite, because you can't maintain an unequal system forever by just stoking chaos. Eventually, things collapse. Here's something to consider. Western elites used racism as a tool when it was convenient. But as the ship starts sinking, they will toss anyone overboard to stay afloat, including poor and middle-class white people. We already see this with things like the opioid crisis, which was fueled by corporate greed, pharma companies, and treated initially not as a public health emergency, but as a crime problem, until it hit so big they had to pay attention. Or look at how in 2008 millions lost homes, of all races, due to financial industry games, and the government bailed out banks, not families. The pattern is wealth over all, and to keep people from uniting in anger over that, they try to keep us separate and suspicious of each other. Also, this current moment, where some people are disillusioned with the American dream as they watch inequality rise. Black folks have had to be realistic about America's promises versus reality for a long time. We love this country, many of us, but we've never been under the illusion that it's perfect or infallible. We always had a bit of that critical distance. James Baldwin once said, "I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." That's a very Black American sentiment. So now, as America writ large faces a crossroads, guess who's uniquely positioned to lead constructive criticism and change? The very people who have held America accountable to its ideals all along. The very people who have had to learn the survive the impossible, the boss level 15 on difficulty, insane. Us. I foresee Western society, if it wants to save itself, having to finally listen to the perspectives of those it used to marginalize. There's a proverb, "The stone that the builder rejected has become the cornerstone." Black people, the ones rejected, just might be key to the renovation project of this nation and this world. I'm not saying we got to save everybody. We've done enough thankless saving, honestly. See every American cultural renaissance. But our experiences have forged wisdom and resilience that the world now needs. And that brings me to something monumental happening on the global stage. Africa and the Black diaspora are rising, and the West is in relative decline. The 21st century will not be the 20th. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on this planet will be African. Think about that. Africa's population is booming, yes, but not just population, potential. Some of the fastest growing economies are in Africa. In the last 20 years, foreign investment in Africa surged to record levels, over $80 billion in 2021, up from just a couple billion in 1990. There's a youthful energy and entrepreneurial spirit there that reminds me of a young Bruce Wayne training in the mountains. You might not see the superhero yet, but he's coming. At the same time, the old Western powers are aging, literally. Populations are graying, birth rates stagnating, their share of world GDP shrinking relatively. It's not instant. The US and Europe aren't down and out yet, but the trend lines show the balance of power shifting. This is important for Black folks in America because for the first time, our ancestral motherland is becoming a global player. That's a game changer for Black identity. It means Africa and its diaspora can develop a symbiotic relationship. Talent and capital can start flowing in both directions. We're already seeing hints of it. Ghana declared a year of return in 2019, inviting Black descendants to visit or invest. African American celebrities are investing in industries in Africa, from Akon's projects in Senegal to tech investments in Nigeria. The cultural exchange is hot. Afrobeats music, Nollywood films, African culture is increasingly part of global pop culture, influencing diaspora youth who now rock dashikis or Afrobeat dance challenges with pride. There's a Pan-African consciousness reawakening, the idea that wherever we are in the world, people of African descent are one extended family with a common origin and intertwined destiny. Now imagine Western decline accelerates. Their societies get more authoritarian or more unequal as they scramble to maintain dominance. We could see even more scapegoating, more xenophobia from those governments. But Black people have a unique option. We don't have to cling to a sinking ship that never fully accepted us. We can collaborate globally with our brethren. The rise of Africa as an economic and political force means Black people globally have a power base that isn't in Western capitals. That's inspiring. It's like in a superhero story when the hero realizes he's not alone. He's part of a larger league. We have continental Africa plus the diaspora. That is our Justice League, if you will. Let me ground this in a historical example. Haiti's revolution in 1804. Talk about a superhero tale. Enslaved Africans in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, Haiti, literally fought the French Empire and won, abolishing slavery and establishing the first Black republic in the New World. They defeated Napoleon's troops, the most powerful military force of the time. That was a beacon to all oppressed people. It was a moment when Black people changed world history. Haiti's victory dealt a blow to colonial slavery and indirectly led to things like the Louisiana Purchase because Napoleon gave up on the Americas. But Haiti was isolated and punished by Western powers for that audacity. France forced Haiti to pay crushing reparations for lost property, i.e. freed slaves, a debt that haunted Haiti's economy for over a century. Why do I bring this up? Because Haiti's revolution was a proof of concept. Black people can free themselves and govern themselves against all odds. The tragedy was, the world wasn't ready to embrace a Black-led nation then, and they tried to strangle it. Now, fast forward. Africa has 54 nations. Many have issues, thanks in part to colonialism's brutal legacy and neo-colonial meddling, but many are finding their footing. Rwanda, for example, rebuilt from genocide to become one of the cleanest, most tech-friendly countries in Africa. Nigeria, despite its challenges, produces Nollywood movies that are beloved across Africa and beyond, and its tech sector is minting new millionaires. Ghana has stable democracy and is building ties with the diaspora. The African Union is pushing for continental free trade and integrated infrastructure. In short, the Black world is regrouping and regaining strength. It's as if our fortress of solitude, to use a Superman analogy, is being built, a place of power and refuge that will make us even harder to defeat. So here we are, Western society creaking, Black society, globally, ascending, or at least poised to. This is a moment of opportunity. It's the part in the story where the villain's power source starts flickering, and the hero realizes their own power has been growing quietly all along. But a hero must recognize their power and use it. Which brings me to our advantage right now and what we need to do with it. We, as Black people, have what I'll call an earned strategic advantage in this moment of global change. We've been through the fire and come out tempered like steel. That means we're not easily shocked, not easily cowed. We've got experience and endurance. That's an advantage no business school or Ivy League education can teach. It's ingrained through generational struggle. Think of it. Who better to lead in times of crisis than those who live in crisis and yet manage to create joy and progress out of it? Who better to solve problems of inequality than those who have been most wronged by it and yet have fought persistently for justice? Our survival has made us innovative. We excel at figuring it out when resources are slim. That's basically what every Black mother has done when stretching a meal, or every Black entrepreneur who couldn't get a bank loan but still launched a business. The wider world is entering a period where adaptability and resilience are the currency, not brute force or inherited privilege. In that arena, we shine. Culturally, our influence is only growing. You might say culture is soft power. Well, we've been seeding the world with that for a long time, and it makes people more receptive to us. How many kids in Asia or Europe idolize Black sports stars, listen to rap, emulate Black fashion? Plenty. That doesn't directly translate to dismantling racism, but it humanizes us to people who might not even have any Black neighbors. It lays groundwork for solidarity. Soft power matters. When African and diaspora culture spreads, it chips away at the old racist imagery of us as solely victims or perpetrators. It presents us as innovators, trendsetters, leaders. I want to highlight the spiritual and psychological fortitude Black people carry. This is harder to quantify, but you feel it in our communities. The way, for instance, Black faith traditions have sustained hope. The Black church, despite any critiques, was a pillar through slavery and civil rights. It gave people a sense of higher purpose and dignity when society denied them both. That faith, whether it's traditional Christianity with that gospel flair, or Islam in Black communities, or an Afrocentric spirituality, taught us about deliverance and liberation. We already believe in miracles because we've seen them in our history. That's powerful in a time when others are losing hope. We have a kind of built-in hope muscle. It's been exercised a lot. We sing "We Shall Overcome" not as naive dreamers, but as people who have overcome before. Let me give a concrete example of our resilience advantage. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I recall how the media was like, black communities are hit hardest, and we were. But I also recall how black folks organized help, information drives, and vaccine clinics in their neighborhoods quickly, often with community organizers and churches stepping in where the government response was lacking. Mutual aid networks sprang up. We've always known how to depend on each other when official systems fail. And as I mentioned earlier, Africa's rise is part of our advantage. Because the narrative is no longer Africa the needy, but Africa the next frontier of innovation and growth, that flips the script. The GDP growth rate of many African countries is simply ridiculous. You have many countries growing at 10% a year or more. The Benin is at 12%, Ivory Coast 10%, Guyana 10%, Ethiopia 8%, South Sudan 22%, Ghana 10%. And these are the numbers from the official sector. Of course, it's not perfect at all. We have seen the issues and what we perceive at endless coups d'etats. But I will submit to you that this is actually a good thing this time around. Most African countries are still under Western neo-colonial rule, which is stealing, yes, there is no other word for it, stealing the economic capacity of these nations. Aside from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, there are no African countries south of the Sahara that are getting more than 5% or royalties from the natural resources being extracted from their soil. I want you to visualize something. Picture all those attempts to destroy us, the schoolhouse doors blocking us, the for-profit prison system, the biased bank managers, the destroyed successful black communities, the media stereotypes, the police used as destabilizing force, the intelligence agencies selling drugs to our kids, the rich oligarchs buying social media platforms so that they can turn it against us. Imagine them as all the bullets and bombs villains threw at us. They expected us to bow down and surrender here and in the motherland. Instead, like a true superhero, we took that energy and made it our armor. Black people are the superheroes of America. It's time to say it loud, own it fully, and act accordingly. Our mission now is to save ourselves, and in the process, save this nation's soul, perhaps even the world's. And guess what? We're up for the task. We always have been. So suit up, family. There's work to do and a world to change. But if anyone can do it, we can. After all, we've been doing the impossible for generations. Because no more will they pretend that our contribution to humanity is negative because we are without history.